So this lesson is about composition, and I'm going to try and simplify it as much as I can. It's a big subject, and I'll try and follow this up with future lessons. 3 things you need to know, 3 basic rules, and I'm talking about focal point, which is a whole subject in itself. And you want to be able to direct the viewer's eye to where you want them to look. So let's look at the first rule. In order to create a focal point, which again is a place where you want the viewer to look, and have their eye wander around to the places you want them to see, you need to have an area that has the greatest contrast and value. That is a key component. The next thing you'll need is the most intensity of color. And if you have the greatest value of contrast and intensity of color in one place, they will look there. And thirdly, you want to have the sharpest edges in the same place as the other 2 happen to be. So with those 3 things in mind, have a look at this image here. You'll see that everything is fairly soft all the way around. There's lots of sense of space. But this man sitting in the window has the sharpest edges and the most contrast of value and the most intense color. Looking at this image here, you'll see that this man sitting, smoking, there's the most intense color around his face and his hands, and the greatest contrast of value, the back of his head against that window behind him. You definitely look towards him, and we tend to look towards people, by the way. That's an instinct that's built into us. Here's something that's a little different. There's lots of color surrounding this old gentleman. But the greatest contrast of value, you'll notice, is behind him. The darkest darks and the lightest lights are focused in the area where his arms are. And so we're drawn to that. Looking at this image here, you'll see contrast and value, and you'll see intense color leading up to this nude that is outside. The cows here, you'll notice that there's a great contrast in value, the darks and lights and warm color around these cows. You can see all that warmth and intense color that is focused on them. Behind the horse, it's very muted. It's very, very light and muted. Warmer colors there, your eye is drawn again to contrast and value. Look at how your eye follows right over to the action there. So taking this image here, this is my butcher. I miss him. We haven't seen each other for a little while because of the lockdown that's happening. But I'm going to take this image here, and I'll show you how I worked through this to create a painting that focused really on him, and using these simple principles, contrast of value, most intense color, and edge work. The combination of those 3 brings your eye to where he's working. There's a lot of clutter behind him, so I need to actually eliminate a lot of that clutter. So here you can see my start on this. This is a still image that I took early on. And your eye is drawn over to him because of the intense color. Yes, there are those 2 dark areas that you see on the right, but I also want the eye to carry across this image to the right as well, to create a triangle. So here you can see I've finished this a little further, and your eye is still drawn to him. That strong red brings you right over to where he's working. Behind, I've eliminated the clutter. There's a little bit of information. This is almost at the finished stage right here. And you can see that your eye is drawn in a triangle from him over to that dark area in the upper right, down again to the counter, across to that knife with a sharp edge. So here's an image that I took, or a photograph I took some time back, and it was rather dull, frankly. A nice scene, it was nice to be there, but as the painting goes, it wasn't really a fabulous subject to work with. But this is what I've done with it. And you can follow along with me. I've actually taken this into an app called Procreate, and I've played with this image. Starting with this one here, I've taken the background and eliminated. I've actually tried to simplify this image a lot so that your eye is drawn towards the main focal point. The main focal point being the boathouse in the distance, or in the midground. I'm trying to eliminate as much as I can and add in areas that will soften edges. Wherever you have sharp edges coming to the outside perimeter, you want to soften them down, because that's like a peripheral, shall we say. And I'm just playing with color here, just fooling around a little bit to see where I want the eye to go. The background, I'm trying to soften that down, eliminate a little bit of the detail that you see there. And the trees, I'm softening those with color. I'm adding a little lighter value so there's not so much intensity of dark and light. Again, greatest areas of contrast are what draw your eye. So I'm softening the whole background, adding a little bit of color, playing again with that background to eliminate too much information. Fooling with the foreground here. You know, this is where you get to decide what trees you want and what you don't, and you can add in wherever you want to. I found that the negative shape in the sky needed a little more work. So you can see these trees that are sort of growing magically, and the lake as well. It's really fun to do this. You know, when you're doing this with paint, it's an easy thing to do. You can change your mind. Acrylic dries quickly, so you can just go right over areas. Oil, you can wipe it down if you want to. This is done in a program, and it's a time lapse of what took me a little bit of time to do, but it gives you the idea. So again, 3 basic rules. It's really important to remember these basic rules, and you will find yourself in control of the focal points. And you can have more than one focal point. Greatest contrast in values. That's critical. You want those darks and those lights in the same place if you want to draw the eye. You also want to have the most intensity of color in the same place as the contrast of value. That'll work. That'll give you a strong focal point. And to be sure that people are looking at your focal point, you also have the sharpest edges. We look out for sharp edges naturally. So when you put that in your work, you'll find that that absolutely works for you. Here's another image, and this is a cafe in Vienna, in Austria. We really don't need to see all those newspapers and don't need to see all the clutter around this person. What I'm trying to do is capture a sense or a feeling of what's going on in this cafe. The man sitting in the window reading his morning paper. And you'll see how I'm softening things down. I'm eliminating. The things you take away are as important, or maybe even more important in some cases, than the subject itself. If you're trying to go for a mood or a feeling, this is the way you can do it. You can always add more detail in later if you really want to, but I find that the simpler the better. Give your subject a strong focal point. Have the viewer look at it and understand the story quickly. And you'll see I'm just softening all kinds of things down, areas that are really not important. Even the foreground, which you would think would be important, you can have the viewer's eyes pass by that foreground. Eliminating all these greens and this plant and so on behind the gentleman, it helps bring him into focus. Working on these areas of contrast. I think it's important to look at it, take time, look at it, see the things that are distracting or aren't working. In this image, I know that one of the things that was bothering me was the table. It was just getting a little bit too much attention, and I didn't know if I should eliminate it, that one that's in front of him. I didn't know if I should eliminate it or just add a little to it and soften the edges. So I've softened the edge a little bit, that works okay, but I sort of felt that really, ideally, it should be a little bit bigger. So I enlarged it, and here we go. And yes, your eye is drawn to that area, but because I've brought the value down, now you're looking at him. So you can paint. Don't forget these lessons. Sharpest edges, most contrast in value, and the most intense color. And I hope you'll check back for my future videos on focal points. And you can always go to my website at andrewjudd.com if you need to be in touch with me or have any questions.